My son slapped me. Right there, in front of everyone, his wife, my grandchildren, my neighbors, even the pastor's wife who gasped so loud the whole hall turned to look. The sting on my face wasn't nearly as sharp as the burn in my chest. He raised his hand like I was nothing, like I hadn't raised him with these very hands. No one said a word. Not even my daughter. I stood there with the casserole dish still in my hand, trembling, humiliated. That was the moment I realized, I didn't lose my son that day. I lost him years ago. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always this old man who gets ignored in his own family. Once, I was strong. I was someone my boy admired. When David was young, he used to follow me around like a shadow. He'd tug at my overalls while I worked on the old Ford truck in our driveway, asking questions I couldn't always answer. Why's the sky blue, Dad? Why does the engine sound like it's coughing? And I'd laugh, wiping grease off my hands to rustle his thick brown hair. I met Marjorie in '68. She worked at the library, just 2 blocks from the hardware store where I spent my paychecks and weekends. She had this quiet smile, like she knew something about the world that the rest of us didn't. When I finally asked her to marry me, I didn't even have a ring. Just a promise that I'd build her a life with my hands, if not with money. We moved into a modest house I built myself, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a yard full of crabgrass and potential. We added on over the years, a front porch when she got pregnant, a second bathroom after David turned 6 and kept hogging the toilet. She made it a home. Curtains she sewed herself. A jar of fresh flowers on the table. Even after a long day at the mill, I'd walk in and it would smell like fresh bread and safety. David was born in that house. He took his first steps on our kitchen linoleum while Marjorie clapped with tears in her eyes. He lost his first tooth during dinner, right into a meatloaf I never got to finish. And when he got older, I coached his little league team even though I didn't know a thing about baseball. I just wanted to be there. We weren't rich, but I made every dollar count. I picked up night shifts. I missed my own birthdays to work overtime so we could afford braces for David, and piano lessons he begged for but never really stuck with. Still, I was proud to provide. That's what a father does. Sunday dinners were sacred. No phones, no TV. Just roast beef, mashed potatoes, and conversation. David would tell us about school, and Marjorie would listen like every word mattered. I remember once, he made a papier-mâché volcano that didn't erupt properly, and he cried like the world had ended. Marjorie held him, and I told him, it's not about the explosion, it's about the effort. He remembered that for years. At least, I thought he did. I taught David how to mow the lawn, how to shake a man's hand, how to apologize when he was wrong. We went fishing every summer, just the 2 of us, out by Lake Monroe. He used to bring a peanut butter sandwich and talk the whole way about whatever comic books he was reading. When he got older, I helped him buy his first car. A rusty old Civic that needed more repairs than it was worth. But it was his. And I watched him drive off that day with the kind of pride that makes your chest feel too full. Then came college. He wanted to study business. Said he'd make us proud. I remember helping him pack. Marjorie cried all the way home after we dropped him off. I just squeezed her hand, thinking, we did good. We raised a good man. He changed some after that. The visits home became shorter, then stopped altogether. I blamed it on busy schedules, growing up. I told Marjorie not to take it personally. But I could see the hurt in her eyes when the holidays passed without so much as a phone call. Still, we never stopped defending him. He's just figuring life out, we'd say. He'll come around. After Marjorie passed, pancreatic cancer, fast and cruel, he came home for the funeral. He gave a beautiful eulogy. Said she was the glue that held us together. Said we'd all be lost without her. I believed him. For a while after, he checked in on me. Brought groceries, helped with repairs. I thought maybe her death had brought us closer. But then he started bringing her around, his wife, Erica. Sharp tongue, quick to sigh when I spoke, always looking at me like I was just an obligation. The dinners changed. No more Sunday roasts. Just takeout containers and awkward silence. I'd ask questions, try to talk about his job, their life. But Erica would check her phone, and David would just nod, barely meeting my eyes. Still, I held on. I told myself it was just a phase. That the boy who once sat on my shoulders to watch fireworks on the 4th of July was still in there somewhere. I wanted to believe the good years meant something. That all the scraped knees I kissed, the nights I worked overtime, the dreams I shelved for their comfort, it had to count for something. I just didn't realize how far gone he already was. The first time I noticed something was off, it was small. Almost forgettable. We were sitting in my living room, David, Erica, and I. I had made pot roast the way Marjorie used to, with carrots and potatoes that soaked up all the flavor. It had been her signature dish. I even used the old blue serving bowl she loved. David barely touched his plate. Erica wrinkled her nose and whispered, not quietly enough, "Why does it always smell like old people in here?" David chuckled. Just a little. But I heard it. I didn't say anything. I looked down at my plate and told myself not to make a scene. But something about that laugh, it chipped something in me. Not deep, not yet, but it chipped. The visits became more irregular after that. And when they did come, it was always rushed. Erica would glance at her watch constantly, and David started bringing lists, things I needed to fix, papers I should get in order, reminders about not letting the house fall apart. He used to ask how I was. Now, he asked if I had considered simplifying. That's the word he used, simplifying. As if this house was clutter, not my life. One afternoon, I found David alone in my study, going through my filing cabinet. He said he was just checking the insurance paperwork, but those weren't insurance files he was holding. He'd been looking through my will. I stood in the doorway and asked, "What are you looking for?" He didn't even flinch. Just making sure everything's where it should be. I let it go. I didn't want to accuse him of anything. Not yet. I wasn't ready to believe what I already feared. When Erica suggested I move into one of those independent senior communities, she said it like it was a gift. It'd be easier for everyone, she smiled, and safer for you. I remember staring at her, searching for some hint of sincerity. She never called me Dad. Always just him or your father. David backed her up. It's not a bad idea, Dad. A lot of people your age are doing it. You'd have people your own age around. Activities, buses to appointments, doesn't that sound better than being here all alone? No, it didn't. What sounded better was my quiet morning coffee in Marjorie's old chair. My garden, which I still tended every day. The sound of the creaky floorboards upstairs that reminded me of 100 footsteps that once ran through this house. But I nodded and said I'd think about it. That was my mistake. I gave them a sliver of permission. From then on, it wasn't a question. It was an assumption. I heard them one evening in the kitchen. They didn't know I was in the hallway. "Erica, I don't care how attached he is. He can't keep up with this place. David, he'll come around. Once he sees how much easier it'll be. Erica, or he won't. Either way, we can't keep waiting. The market's good now. We could get a lot for it. Get a lot for it." They were talking about my house. The home I built with my hands. The one Marjorie painted room by room, even when her knees gave out. That was when the coldness turned into something else, something calculating. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to see how far it would go. David started asking about my finances more often. You still handling your bills okay, Dad? Need help with the mortgage? There's equity in this house, you know. I'm not stupid. I may be old, but I know when someone's circling. I was a foreman for 30 years. I've seen enough slow takeovers to recognize when someone's trying to move you out of your own life without you noticing. But what hurt more than anything was the way David's eyes changed. He stopped looking at me like I was his father. He looked at me like I was a liability. I started sleeping less. My thoughts kept circling back to Marjorie. What would she say? What would she do? She always believed people showed you who they were when they thought you weren't looking. I started watching. Really watching. How David's voice changed when he needed something. How Erica smiled more when she was pushing her ideas. How they both seemed more interested in what I owned than how I was. One Sunday, David mentioned power of attorney. Casually, over dessert. Said it would just be a precaution. I nearly choked on my pie. That night, I sat in the living room long after they left. I stared at the spot where Marjorie used to knit, and I whispered into the silence, "They're not coming here to visit anymore. They're coming to take." That was the night I decided I wouldn't be passive anymore. It happened on a Sunday. Not just any Sunday, but the one I used to call our day. The kind where, once upon a time, we'd all gather around the table, Marjorie's pie cooling on the windowsill, David helping me carve the roast, laughter echoing from every room. But those days were long gone. Now, the house felt foreign, like a museum filled with strangers pretending they belonged. The only real thing left in that dining room was me, and even I wasn't sure how much longer I'd be allowed to stay. David and Erica had insisted on hosting this time. It was still at my house, of course, because they said the location was more convenient for everyone. But they brought the food, takeout, and told me to just relax. I had made an apple crumble, like Marjorie used to, but they left it untouched on the counter. The table was crowded. My daughter Jenna had come, along with her husband and their 2 kids. A few friends of David's I didn't recognize were also there, all gathered around, chatting, laughing. I sat at the far end, like a guest in my own home. Then came the moment. David stood, glass of wine in hand, and tapped it with a spoon. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" He smiled the way a salesman does, rehearsed and empty. "I just wanted to thank everyone for being here today. It means a lot. As you all know, we've been discussing some changes, ways to make sure Dad here," he gestured toward me with a wink, "is comfortable and taken care of." I sat up straighter. I hadn't agreed to any announcement. My gut twisted. He kept going. "We've started the process of moving forward with a transition plan, something long-term and sustainable. Dad's been struggling with upkeep around here, and frankly, it's just too much house for one person." Erica chimed in, smiling wide, "We found a beautiful assisted living facility just 10 minutes from here. It has a garden and everything." My jaw clenched. I hadn't agreed to any of this. I stood, slowly. "That's not happening." The room went quiet. David's smile faltered. "Dad," he said, with that condescending tone he'd picked up somewhere along the way. "We already discussed this." "No," I said. "You discussed it." I listened. "That's not the same." Erica crossed her arms. "We're trying to help you. You live in the past. This house is falling apart." I took a breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "This house is my home. And it was your mother's. I'm not leaving." David stepped closer. "You're being stubborn. We've already spoken to a realtor." That's when I knew. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a move, pre-planned, coordinated. I shook my head slowly. You made all these decisions without me? You weren't exactly offering solutions, he said. My daughter Jenna shifted uncomfortably in her seat but said nothing. No one said anything. Not even when I looked at each of them, hoping for some voice, some ally. But all I saw were lowered eyes and tight lips. And then, in the silence, David said it, "You don't live here anymore, Dad. It's time." He reached for the documents in his coat pocket. That's when it happened. I slapped the papers from his hand. Reflex. Instinct. Anger. They scattered across the floor like dry leaves. David looked down, then up at me, his face darkening. "You want to do this now?" he asked, voice low. "I'm still your father," I said. He laughed, bitter, sharp. "No. You're a bitter old man clinging to a memory." And then, in front of everyone, he raised his hand and slapped me. It wasn't hard. But it was loud. Enough to stop all conversation, enough to make my granddaughter gasp. I stood there stunned. My cheek stung. My heart broke. I waited, for Jenna to shout, for Erica to apologize, for someone to do something. But nothing came. They all just sat there. Watching. Waiting for what I would do next. David straightened his jacket, picked up the papers, and walked to the kitchen. Erica followed. My daughter whispered, "Dad," but her voice faded into nothing. I left the table and walked outside. The wind was sharp, but it was real. Unlike everything in that room. I sat on the porch, my hands shaking. Not from the slap. From what it meant. The moment a child lays hands on the parent who raised them, it changes everything. That's when it hit me, he didn't just want the house. He wanted me gone. Not just physically, but erased. Forgotten. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the dining table, staring at the untouched crumble. Marjorie's recipe. Her handwriting still on the index card, stained with cinnamon and memory. And I realized, if they were planning behind my back, it was time I started planning behind theirs. I stayed quiet after the slap. I didn't tell anyone what it felt like, not the neighbors, not my church friends, not even my daughter Jenna, who later called just once to check in. I didn't answer. I didn't trust myself not to scream. Instead, I watched. I listened. And what I started to notice made my stomach churn. They thought I was too old to notice details. But I wasn't. I was grieving. And grief can make you blind for a while. But eventually, it makes you sharp, cutting sharp. The first thing I saw was a printed email. Folded up and left on the coffee table. A mistake, maybe. Or maybe arrogance. It was from Erica to a realtor. Subject line, timeline on property readiness. She'd attached photos, of my house. Without my permission. I stood there in my own living room, looking at staged pictures I never approved. Blank walls, my favorite chair moved out of frame, my wedding photo gone from the mantel. They were scrubbing me out. I didn't say a word. I folded the paper and placed it in a drawer with the rest of the evidence I'd started collecting. The next day, I followed the sound of David's voice coming from the backyard. He was pacing, talking on his Bluetooth headset, thinking I was asleep. "She won't fight it," he said. "He's stubborn, but we've got it set up. Power of attorney is next. After that, it's just paperwork. House is appraised at nearly $600,000. A pause. No. He doesn't even know what month it is most days. I did know what month it was. I knew exactly what day it was. It was the day I buried what little faith I had left in my son. I thought of Marjorie again. I could hear her voice in my head like it was yesterday. She used to say, "People show you who they are when they think you're not looking. Don't ignore that, Henry." She was right. She always was. I spent that night going through the old photo albums. The ones David hadn't touched, the ones he didn't think were worth scanning. Pictures of him in his little baseball uniform, missing a tooth, grinning like he owned the world. Marjorie standing beside me with her hand on his shoulder, proud and peaceful. And I asked myself, how did we get here? How does a boy go from calling you, Daddy, and holding your hand to plotting your removal like you're just some obstacle in his path? Maybe it wasn't all his fault. Maybe I gave too much. Maybe I didn't teach him that love doesn't come with entitlement. But whatever the cause, the outcome was clear. I wasn't just being ignored. I was being phased out. So I started documenting everything. Quietly. Phone calls. Emails. Conversations. Even that slap, captured on the baby monitor I kept in the hallway since Marjorie got sick. I never unplugged it. I called an old friend from the mill, Joe Harrelson, whose daughter had become an estate lawyer. I didn't tell David. I didn't tell anyone. I took a taxi across town and sat in a stiff leather chair while Joe's daughter, Rachel, listened to every word I said. She didn't interrupt. She didn't pity me. She just nodded and said, "We'll protect what's yours." She told me something I'll never forget: it's not revenge if it's justice. That line sat heavy with me. I wasn't trying to punish my son. I just wanted peace. But peace doesn't come from giving in to people who want you gone. It comes from standing up, even if your knees are shaking. Back at home, I began sorting through every file, every bank record, every deed. I kept the documents in a fireproof box under my bed. One morning, while organizing old receipts, I found something else, a letter from Marjorie. Unopened. It was dated 2 weeks before she died. In her handwriting, still so steady, she'd written, "Henry, if you're reading this without me, I want you to promise me something. Don't let them take what we built. You earned every nail, every floorboard. If they don't protect you, protect yourself. Love, always, M." I cried for an hour. Then I made the call to the notary. Speech balloon: have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I asked David to meet me for lunch. Just him, no Erica, no paperwork, no pretending. I told him it'd be my treat, like the old days. We met at the diner where I used to take him for pancakes after his Little League games. Same cracked vinyl booths, same smell of grease and syrup. But everything felt different. He sat down with his phone in hand, scrolling, half listening. I had to clear my throat twice before he looked up. "I wanted to talk about the house," I said. He gave a tired smile. "Finally. I was wondering when you'd come around." That smile, it wasn't relief. It was victory. Like he'd already won something. "I overheard your conversation last week," I said. "Out back. You said I didn't know what month it was." His eyes didn't blink. "Dad, I was just talking strategy. It's not personal." "Not personal?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You're planning to take my home out from under me, and you think that's not personal? You're making this harder than it has to be," he said, leaning forward now. "Look, this place is too much for you. You can't keep up. We're trying to help." "No," I said flatly. "You're trying to inherit early. There's a difference." He scoffed, actually scoffed. "Do you even hear yourself? You're paranoid. You should be grateful we're even involved." "Grateful?" I repeated, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "For what? For slapping me in my own house? For planning my removal like I'm some broken appliance? That slap," he muttered, "was a mistake. But you provoked me." There it was. The mask slipping. The words came sharp and cold. "I provoked you by not handing you my life on a silver platter? He leaned back, folding his arms. You're not thinking straight. Erica and I have talked to professionals. They said it's not uncommon for people your age to resist change. Sometimes it takes pressure to get them to accept reality. I stared at him. Pressure. That's what I was now, a resistant subject. An inconvenience. Something to be handled. I stood up. This conversation is over. But before I turned away, I saw something in his eyes. A flicker of fear. Not because he thought I'd strike him. No, because he realized I was no longer confused. No longer compliant. I saw it, and I held on to it. Back home, I made tea and sat with my thoughts. That conversation confirmed everything Rachel had said. If I didn't act, they'd force my hand, and maybe worse. A few days later, I got a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Daniels from 2 houses down. She's in her 70s, walks her dog rain or shine, and talks like she's narrating a noir film. I heard what your son did, she said bluntly. We all did. Slapping a man like that, in his own home? Shameful. I tried to brush it off, but she looked me square in the eye. My husband left me nothing, she said. Thought the kids would look after me. They didn't. Don't make that mistake. I nodded slowly. I'd heard similar whispers at church, at the grocery store. Sympathy, quiet offers to help, little looks of solidarity. People saw more than I realized. That night, I sat down and wrote a letter to Marjorie. Not for her to read, just for me to speak the words I didn't know how to say aloud. I'm sorry I let it get this far. I thought love would protect me. I thought raising him right meant he'd remember who I was. But he forgot. And now, I won't let him take what's left of us. The next morning, I made another appointment with Rachel. This time, it wasn't just about updating some documents. It was about control. Dignity. Justice. We reviewed everything, my will, the property deed, even the medical directives. She asked if I wanted to include a clause that would disinherit any heir who contested the will. Yes, I said without hesitation. If they can't accept my decision, they don't deserve what I worked for. Rachel looked at me for a long second. You know, most people your age don't make these choices until it's too late. I gave a tired smile. I've been too late before. Not again. Leaving that office, I felt a strange mix of grief and pride. Grief for what I'd lost, the son I thought I raised. Pride for what I was doing now, not out of spite, but for peace. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the decision to stop letting people take from you. And I had just decided. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Not because it was a fancy pen, it wasn't. Just a standard blue ballpoint, handed to me across Rachel's desk. But when I wrapped my fingers around it, my hand trembled slightly. I could feel the weight of every year, every memory, every sacrifice pressing down on that small gesture. Rachel gave me a moment. She was good at that, understanding the silence between words. She didn't push. Just waited. This isn't easy, I muttered. She nodded. It's not supposed to be. But it needs to be done. I looked down at the papers in front of me. My updated will. Not just a document, this was the last word I would ever get to speak without interruption. The last say over what mattered most. I had read every word 5 times. Each paragraph held memories, some bitter, some sweet. The first version of this will, drawn up more than 2 decades ago, had David listed as the primary heir. Back then, it made sense. He was my only son. He had promised to look after me and keep the house in the family. But promises are fragile things. Now, his name was gone. Replaced. The bulk of the estate, my house, my savings, even the truck, was redirected. A modest amount would go to Jenna, who'd stayed mostly quiet through everything but hadn't raised a hand against me. The rest would go to a foundation Marjorie had always supported, a home for aging veterans with no family. She used to say, no man should die feeling forgotten. Rachel pointed out the clause I'd insisted on, a no-contest provision. If David or Erica, or anyone, really, tries to challenge this, the estate defaults to charity. Everything. No negotiations. I nodded slowly. If they want to fight me even after I'm gone, they get nothing. Rachel tilted her head slightly. Are you sure about that? No, I said honestly. But I'm resolved. I took a deep breath, signed my name at the bottom, and placed the pen gently on the desk. Rachel slid the papers into a secure envelope. We'll file the originals. You'll get a notarized copy to keep somewhere safe. I nodded again. I felt like I had aged 5 years in the last 5 minutes. When I stood, my knees creaked louder than usual. Rachel helped me to the door. Do you want me to call a cab? She asked. I shook my head. I need to walk. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. I walked slower than I used to, but each step felt more certain. I passed a playground where David used to climb the jungle gym and shout for me to watch him. I paused there for a while, staring at the empty swings. It's strange, how time folds. One moment you're chasing a child through the backyard with a water hose, the next you're rewriting your will to keep him from stealing your future. I didn't hate David. That's the worst part. Hate would have been easier. Cleaner. But what I felt was messier, disappointment wrapped in heartbreak. A wound that never scabbed over because the bleeding came from the inside. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table and placed the will copy into the old lockbox beneath the sink. It had held Marjorie's jewelry for years. Now it held something far more valuable, my voice, preserved for after I'm gone. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in Marjorie's old chair by the window. I imagined her beside me, knitting something we didn't need just for the rhythm of it. I imagined her asking, "Did you do the right thing?" And I answered her quietly, aloud, "I don't know. But I did the only thing I could." The next morning, David texted me for the first time since our lunch. "David, we're coming by Saturday to take measurements in the living room. For staging. Hope that's okay." "No, how are you?" No apology. Just expectation. Control. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Rachel and asked her to draft one more document, a revocation of any prior powers of attorney David thought he might still hold. She said, "You're protecting yourself well." "I'm not protecting myself," I said. "I'm protecting what Marjorie and I built. There's a difference." She understood. On Saturday, they came by just as promised. Erica had a clipboard. David brought a tape measure. They didn't even knock, just let themselves in like it was already theirs. I sat in the living room as they moved around me. I didn't speak. Just watched. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't scared or angry. I was calm. Because now I knew, they might think they'd won. But everything they thought was theirs, wasn't. They crossed a line I didn't even know existed. I thought the slap was the worst it could get. I thought overhearing them plan my removal was the final blow. But betrayal has layers, like rot. It goes deeper the longer you ignore the smell. It was a Monday morning. I had just come back from the pharmacy when I noticed something strange. My garage door was open. David had a key. So did Erica. I walked in and found half my tools missing. The mower, the ladder, even Marjorie's old garden bench. Gone. In their place was a folded piece of printer paper taped to the wall. Clearing clutter for staging. "Don't worry, we'll replace anything you actually need." No signature. No call. No permission. I stood there, staring at that note, my hands shaking so badly I dropped the keys. Clutter, I whispered. They called my life clutter. My tools. My history. The bench where Marjorie used to sit and hum while I pulled weeds. They didn't just move things. They erased pieces of me. I walked back inside, dazed. As I passed the hallway, I saw that the framed photo of my wedding day, me in a gray suit, Marjorie in a cream-colored dress, smiling wide, was missing. I checked the box under the sink. My will was still there. But they had touched more than my belongings. They had touched her. That evening, I called David. I didn't text. I didn't ask. He answered on the third ring. Hey, Dad. Everything okay? I want you to come over. Alone. Now. He paused. Why? I'm not asking, David. I'm telling. 10 minutes later, he was at the door. Still in his work clothes, tie loosened, laptop bag slung over his shoulder like he was doing me a favor. He stepped inside casually, not even glancing around. Look, he started, about the garage. Erica got a little eager. You went through my things, I said. My voice was quiet. Cold. Yeah, but you weren't using half of it. Come on, Dad, we're just trying to help. You're not helping. You're stealing. You took tools that belonged to your grandfather. You threw out the bench your mother used every spring. He shifted uncomfortably. We can buy you a new bench. I don't want a new one, I said. I wanted the one she sat on. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? He rolled his eyes. Dad, you're being emotional. Damn right I'm emotional, I snapped, louder now. You've turned my home into a showroom for buyers I never approved. You slapped me. You went through my documents. You're staging the living room like I'm already dead. That stopped him. He looked at me for a long second. And then, quietly, like he was admitting nothing and everything at once, he said, we just thought it'd be easier to get things moving if we took initiative. Initiative. That was the final straw. I walked to the hallway closet, pulled out the envelope with Rachel's updates, and handed it to him. What's this? He asked. Read it. He scanned the top page. His face turned pale. You changed the will? I protected myself, I corrected. You're out of it. Entirely. Try to fight it, and everything goes to charity. Contest it, and you get nothing. Not a cent. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I'd never seen him speechless. Not once in his life. You've been measuring the square footage like a vulture circling a corpse. But I'm not dead, David. I'm not gone. And this house doesn't belong to you. He sat down slowly, like his legs couldn't hold him. I thought you'd come around, he mumbled. I thought once you saw how much easier things could be. You wanted me out, I said. That's not easier. That's exile. He looked up at me, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something, regret? Maybe. But it was buried under years of entitlement. I just wanted to secure our future, he said. No, I replied. You wanted to secure your future. And now you'll have to do it without my help. He stood, looked at the envelope again, and then at me. Does Jenna know? She doesn't want the house, I said. She doesn't want anything. She just wants peace. And she respects me enough to let me have mine. He didn't respond. Just walked out the door without another word. I sat down in my chair, closed my eyes, and let the silence settle. This wasn't just about keeping the house. It was about reclaiming myself. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't being steamrolled by the people I loved. I was standing up. even if I was standing alone. I pulled Marjorie's photo from the drawer, dusted it off, and set it gently back on the wall. The house wasn't empty. It was finally mine again. I hadn't been invited. They didn't expect me to come. That was their first mistake. David and Erica were hosting a family dinner at a rented event hall just outside town, some over-the-top catered thing they were calling a celebration of new beginnings. I heard about it from Jenna, who sent me the flyer out of guilt. I wasn't listed on the invite. Not even as a footnote. "They're announcing something," she said, quietly over the phone. "I thought you should know." I already knew. They were going to make it official. David was going to stand up in front of everyone, his cousins, family friends, old co-workers, and announce the house sale. Talk about how it was bittersweet, how I had graciously agreed to transition to a new phase of life. A soft lie, wrapped in polite applause. Except I hadn't agreed to anything. So I put on my best jacket, navy wool, a little snug from disuse, and packed an envelope full of truth. When I arrived, heads turned. You'd think a ghost had walked in. Erica's smile dropped the moment she saw me. David looked like he'd swallowed a mouthful of nails. But neither stopped me. They couldn't, not in front of everyone. I walked past the buffet, past the fake floral centerpieces and the slideshow looping photos of David's career milestones. I stood in the center of the room and tapped my cane once on the floor. Everyone quieted. "Thank you," I said, steady and calm. "I won't take much of your time." David stepped forward, hand half raised. "Dad, this isn't the—" I said I won't take much of your time, I repeated. Louder now. Firmer. He froze. "I just wanted to clear up a few misconceptions," I continued, my voice carrying. "There's been talk about me downsizing. About me moving into a facility. About the house being sold." I held up the envelope. "This is my will. My revised legal will. David has been removed as an heir. Erica was never included to begin with. There is now a clause that if anyone contests this document, every penny goes to charity." Gasps. Whispered voices. Eyes wide and blinking. I turned to David. "You may want to consult your lawyer before you put any more "for sale" signs on things that don't belong to you." He opened his mouth again, red-faced, but nothing came out. Erica reached for his arm, whispering furiously. I looked to the crowd, people I had known for decades. Some had worked with me. Some had eaten Marjorie's peach cobbler at our kitchen table. I may be old. I may walk slow and forget where I put my glasses. But I haven't forgotten who I am. And I haven't forgotten who built that house. Every nail. Every board. Every hour I spent away from my wife and children to pay for it. I looked directly at my son. "You forgot." Jenna stood in the back. She didn't speak, but she didn't look away either. Her eyes were wet. I nodded once, tucked the envelope under my arm, and walked out. No one followed me. Outside, the night air was cool and quiet. I stood by my truck, heart pounding in my chest, not from fear or regret, but from relief. It was done. Not the pain. That would take longer. But the silence was over. The pretending was finished. The next morning, I made coffee and watched the sunrise through the kitchen window. The house was still mine. Not just legally, but spiritually. I had reclaimed it. The phone rang once. Twice. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't need any more apologies that weren't real. Later that week, I found a letter on the porch. No stamp. No name. Just my name written in David's handwriting. I didn't open it. Some things can wait. Brain, do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The silence came heavy. Not loud, not angry, just still. Thick, like fog sitting in your bones. The kind of quiet that creeps in when the storm's passed but the sky still hasn't cleared. For the first time in weeks, no one knocked. No one called. No surprise visits. No texts about measurements or next steps. It was as if I had become invisible again, but this time, I welcomed it. Peace, I discovered, isn't always joyful. Sometimes it's just the absence of invasion. The voicemail David left after the confrontation was short. "You embarrassed me, Dad. In front of everyone. You could have just talked to me." I deleted it. I had talked. He just hadn't listened. I walked through the house that next morning slowly, as if seeing it for the first time. The sun poured in through the eastern windows, lighting up the old rug where Marjorie used to sit cross-legged, reading to our son. Dust particles floated in the light like memories refusing to settle. I spent the day reorganizing drawers, oiling the front door hinges, and putting Marjorie's bench back in the garden. It had been tossed behind the shed like a broken toy. I cleaned it, sanded down the splinters, and repainted it the pale sage she loved. In the quiet, my thoughts wandered more freely. I thought about David, not with hate, not even anger, but grief. A strange kind of mourning for someone who's still alive but unreachable. I wondered if he remembered the first time he scraped his knee on the driveway and cried until I picked him up. Or the summer night we stayed out catching fireflies until Marjorie had to call us in twice. Those moments had meant everything to me. Maybe they had meant nothing to him. Or maybe they had, until time, pride, and Erica's cold ambition rewired his memory. One afternoon, I went into town to pick up some light bulbs. At the hardware store, a younger man I didn't recognize nodded at me. "You're Henry, right?" he asked. "From the dinner last week?" I paused. "I am." He gave a respectful smile. "I was there. I'm friends with your niece." I just wanted to say, "Good on you. Most folks wouldn't have had the guts to say what you said." I nodded, not out of pride, but acknowledgement. It was strange being known for that moment. But maybe it was better than being forgotten completely. At church, I felt the shift too. Whispers when I walked past, then firmer handshakes. People who used to glance past me now looked me in the eye. Some offered sympathy, some respect. But most simply offered space. Jenna finally came by, a week after the dinner. She didn't knock, just stood at the edge of the porch as I tended the hydrangeas. "I wanted to check on you," she said quietly. I nodded. "I'm still here." She smiled, but it was sad. I didn't say anything that day. I should have. "You said enough by showing up," I replied. "That's more than some did." She looked at the house, at the bench, at the garden slowly coming back to life. "You planning to stay here long term?" she asked. "I plan to live here until I can't." I paused. "Then I'll decide for myself." She sat beside me on the bench, Marjorie's bench, and for a long while, we just listened to the wind rustle through the trees. "I always loved this place," she said. "It smells like my childhood." That stayed with me long after she left. I spent the rest of the week walking a little farther each day. Down to the park. Over to the corner store. Past the pond where Marjorie and I used to sit when we couldn't afford movie nights. I wasn't fast. My knees ached. But I moved. I had movement. I had breath. I wasn't finished yet. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the faintest hint of something returning. Not joy, not yet. But maybe its shadow. The whisper of purpose. There was life here still. Not just in the walls of the house, or the soil beneath the hydrangeas, but in me. And I wasn't ready to give it to people who saw me only as an obstacle. The idea came slow, like the first breath after a deep sleep. It was a Thursday afternoon. I just finished repainting the garden fence, a job I hadn't done in years. I leaned against the porch rail, tired but satisfied, when I saw a girl ride past on her bike. Probably 17 or so. Her shoelace caught in the pedal and down she went, hard onto the pavement. I shuffled as fast as I could toward her. She was already sitting up, brushing gravel from her palms, sniffling and trying not to cry. "You all right?" I asked gently. She nodded, embarrassed. "Just got caught." "I'm fine." I offered her a clean rag I kept in my apron pocket. She blinked. "Thanks. Want some water?" I asked. "I've got a pitcher on the porch." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." We sat quietly on the bench, sipping from two mismatched cups. Her name was Elise. She lived a few blocks over. Said her mom worked double shifts and she mostly took care of herself. I asked if she had any siblings. "One," she said. "But he's locked up." Her voice was flat. Like she'd said it too many times already. After a pause, she added, "Your house smells like fresh dirt and cookies." I laughed. "That's about right." She smiled, just barely. "Feels safe here." Those words clung to me after she left. Safe. Not big. Not valuable. Not sellable. Safe. That night, I walked through every room in the house, slowly, like a man with a mission. I ran my fingers along the walls, remembered what each room used to be. The study where Marjorie kept her scrapbooks. David's old room with the glow-in-the-dark stars still faint on the ceiling. The guest room where Marjorie nursed her sister through chemo. Even the attic, filled with dusty boxes and years of just-in-case junk. And for the first time, I didn't see things. I saw potential. What if this house could still serve a purpose? What if, instead of sitting in it alone, guarding it like some relic, I turned it into what it had always been? A sanctuary. The next day, I called Rachel and asked what the legal path would look like if I wanted to convert my home into something useful. She asked what I had in mind. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I want to open it up to someone who needs it. Not for profit. Not for show. Just, someone who needs a place like this." She said she'd make a few calls. By the end of the week, I had coffee with a woman named Talia, who ran a local program for youth aging out of foster care. Kids turning 18 with nowhere to go. Many ended up couch surfing, some homeless, a few worse. They just need stability, she told me. Somewhere to sleep that isn't the street. Somewhere that doesn't feel like a temporary stop. I looked at the house again with new eyes. I had 4 bedrooms. 2 bathrooms. A stocked kitchen. A large backyard. And more silence than I knew what to do with. "I can't run a program," I told her. "But I can open a door." She smiled. "That's all they need. Just someone to leave the porch light on." We got to work. Over the next few weeks, I cleared out furniture, boxed up old keepsakes, and repainted rooms with soft, calming colors. Talia brought by 2 volunteers, former foster youth now in college, who offered to help me patch drywall and rehang cabinets. I hadn't had that much conversation in years. We talked about music, memories, how to make the perfect grilled cheese. They asked about Marjorie. I told them how she used to hum Patsy Cline while ironing sheets and never burned a single one. For the first time in so long, the house wasn't just breathing again, it was laughing. One of the girls, Maya, said to me, "This doesn't feel like a shelter. It feels like someone cared before we even got here." And she was right. Marjorie had always believed in second chances. In community. In doing the right thing, even when it didn't make sense to anyone else. I think she would have been proud of this. Of me. The final paperwork came through, official designation as a temporary residential safe home for youth in transition. Nothing fancy. No ribbon cutting. Just a name on the mailbox in my crooked handwriting. Marjorie's house. It wasn't about saving anyone. I wasn't trying to be a hero. But I knew what it felt like to be pushed aside. To be made to feel like your value expired. And if I could stop even one person from feeling that again, even for a night, then this house still had a reason to stand. The first night they moved in, I didn't sleep much. Not because of noise, no, the house stayed quiet, respectful. It was the energy that kept me awake. A new kind of hum. Footsteps where silence used to live. A creaky floorboard upstairs at midnight that made me smile instead of flinch. The house was alive again. The 3 residents who moved in first were all between 18 and 22. Maya, who wanted to become a nurse. Leo, who barely spoke but always made sure the porch lights were on before I even noticed the sun was setting. And Samira, who had this way of laughing with her whole body, like she was catching up on lost time. I gave them space. That was important. This wasn't a charity project. It was their home too. Still, they knocked on my door often enough to borrow a hammer or ask about the garden. We'd talk sometimes over coffee on the porch. They never asked me to explain myself. They just accepted that I was here, and that was more than my own son had done in years. One evening, I came into the kitchen to find Samira rearranging the pantry. "Hope you don't mind," she said, smiling. "You had all your spices hidden behind canned beans." "Marjorie used to do the same," I said. "Except she organized them by memory. Drove me nuts. I could never find the cumin." Samira grinned. "She sounds like she ran this place." "She did," I replied. "She still does, in a way." Maya painted the upstairs bathroom a soft green. Said it felt like morning fog. Leo built shelves in the garage using leftover wood from the shed. I hadn't realized how good it felt to hear tools again, the hammering, the measuring, the breathing life into old things. And then there was the garden. I hadn't planted anything since Marjorie passed. The soil had gone dry, cracked from years of sun and no care. But one morning, I stepped outside to find Maya crouched by the old raised beds, turning the soil with her bare hands. "Hope this is okay," she said without looking up. "I had some seeds. We planted together the next day. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and Marjorie's favorite, snapdragons. Something about the dirt under my nails, the sun on my neck, the soft rustle of Maya's voice beside me, it filled the air with more than just purpose. It filled it with peace. I didn't notice the change in me right away. But one morning, I looked in the mirror and saw a man who was standing straighter. A little more color in the cheeks. A little more steadiness in the eyes. Not because time healed me. Because people noticed me. Not for what I could give, not for what I owned, but for who I was. One afternoon, Leo knocked on my door. He handed me a worn paperback, of Mice and Men, with a sticky note that said, "I think you'd like this. It's about loneliness. But also about loyalty." I hadn't cried over a book in 30 years. I did that night. Word spread fast in the neighborhood. Some folks didn't understand. A few were skeptical. One neighbor even asked if I was running a boarding house. "No," I said. "I'm sharing my home." Still, others came by with offers to help. Mrs. Daniels from 2 doors down brought over pies and blankets. My pastor offered to bring donated groceries. Even the teenager who used to skateboard past the house every day stopped to ask if we needed an extra shovel. That's when I realized, I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Blood might make you family, but loyalty makes you kin. And these kids, these once-forgotten souls who laughed in my kitchen and watered my tomatoes, they were the most loyal I'd seen in years. David never visited. Jenna did. A few times. She never stayed long, but she always brought something: homemade soup, a potted plant, once even a handwritten note from her daughter that said, "Thank you for helping people, Grandpa." I kept that one on the fridge. One quiet Sunday morning, Maya brought out a photo album she found tucked behind the bookshelf. I hadn't touched it since Marjorie passed. She sat beside me on the couch and flipped through it slowly. Every now and then she'd point to a picture: David on a bike, Marjorie holding a birthday cake, and ask questions like, "What was this day like?" or "Did she bake often?" It wasn't pity. It was curiosity. Care. It was the kind of listening that turns a stranger into family. Later that evening, I wrote a letter to Marjorie. I do that sometimes when the quiet gets too deep. They're not ours by blood, I wrote, but they are ours. They care, Marjorie. They don't call me Dad or Grandpa, but they ask me how I'm feeling. They put tools back where they belong. They water your flowers without being told. And when they leave in the morning, they always say goodbye. You would have loved them. She would have. She always saw people for who they could become, not just what they were. This house isn't just a house anymore. It's a home again. The knock came late in the evening, long after dinner, long after I'd locked the front door like I always did out of habit more than fear. 3 soft raps. No ringing bell. Just the kind of knock that says, "I don't know if I should be here." I opened the door and found David standing on the porch. He looked different. Not older, exactly. Just smaller. As if the weight of everything he'd tried to control had finally started pushing back. He didn't speak right away. Just held a manila envelope in both hands like it was going to burn him if he let go. "I'm not here to argue," he said, voice low. I nodded once and stepped aside. He walked in slowly, eyes scanning the walls. The house had changed. It was warmer, busier. Shoes by the door. A new photo on the mantel, Maya and Leo holding garden tools, grinning in front of the rebuilt bench. The one Marjorie used to love. David's eyes lingered on it. "This place looks different," he said. "It feels different," I replied. "Alive, finally." He sat down on the edge of the couch, still clutching that envelope. He didn't look at me when he spoke next. I read the will again. Rachel sent me a courtesy copy. I stayed silent. He cleared his throat. "You made your point. Loud and clear." Still, I said nothing. I had no desire to rub it in. I just wanted the truth to sit in the room with us for a while. After a long pause, he said, "I was angry when I got it. Erica was furious. She still is. She said I should sue. Said you were manipulated." I looked at him then, really looked at him. "And what did you say?" He looked down at his hands. I said no. Silence. I said we had already taken too much. For a moment, something in my chest loosened. "I won't pretend I understand everything you're doing," he said. "I don't get why you'd open your house to strangers. I don't get why you'd choose them over," he stopped himself. "Over family. They didn't take from me," I said simply. "They didn't try to erase me. They didn't slap me in the face and call it love." He nodded slowly. "I know." Then he handed me the envelope. "What's this?" "I sold the stuff we took from the garage," he said. "Tools. The bench. The mower. I bought back what I could. It's all in the truck. And what I couldn't get back, that's the cash inside." I didn't move to open it. "It's not an apology," he added quickly. "I know that's not enough. I just didn't want to leave it undone. I sat down across from him, resting my cane against the arm of the chair. What do you want from me, David? He looked at me for the first time in months. Eyes not full of arrogance or impatience, but fatigue. And maybe, just barely, regret. I don't know, he said. Maybe nothing. Maybe just a chance to sit in this room without feeling like a stranger. That, at least, I could allow. So we sat. No yelling. No blaming. Just silence, heavy and awkward, but honest. Eventually, I said, the door's open, but I'm not. He nodded again. I understand. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. This wasn't some made-for-TV reconciliation. It was two men sitting with the damage they'd done to each other and choosing not to make it worse. When he stood to leave, he glanced at the kitchen. You still make that apple crumble? No, I said. But Samira does. Her version has cinnamon and cloves. He smiled. Mom would have liked that. Yes, I said quietly. She would have. He left without another word. I stood at the window and watched him drive away. I didn't feel closure. Not really. But I felt lighter. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in a while. He came. Not for forgiveness, but for something else. I don't know if I'll ever give him what he wants. But I gave him a chair to sit in. That has to be enough for now. And as I turned off the lights, I thought of Marjorie again. We can't choose who we raise, she once told me, but we can choose who we let stay in our hearts. I chose peace. I chose purpose. And I chose to let go of the need for someone else's apology to define my healing. Speech balloon: would you forgive your child after such betrayal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. The ceremony wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. Just a few folding chairs on the lawn, a plastic table with cookies and lemonade, and the front porch cleaned so well you could almost see your reflection in the wood. The sign above the door, painted in soft blue, hand-lettered by Samira, read: Marjorie's house, home for those finding their way. People came. Neighbors. Church folks. A local reporter who'd heard rumors about the old man who turned his family home into a sanctuary. Even the mayor stopped by, said a few kind words, posed for a photo with Maya and Leo. But the moment that stuck with me most wasn't anything public. It was after. When everyone had gone, and the porch lights glowed softly in the dusk, and Maya came and sat beside me with 2 glasses of sweet tea. You did something rare, she said. You gave people a second chance without asking for anything back. I shook my head. I didn't do this for them. She raised an eyebrow. I did it for her, I said. And for me. Because for a while, I forgot what it felt like to live in a home. I thought the house only had meaning if it passed down through blood. I didn't realize meaning could come from how we live in it, not just who owns it. She sipped her tea, nodded. Still. You didn't have to. But you did. I looked at the garden, blooming again, wild with color. I looked at the upstairs windows glowing with light. I listened to the faint sound of music drifting down the hall, laughter echoing softly. And I knew something for certain: this house had outlived its original purpose. But instead of being emptied, it had been reborn. I wrote one final letter to Marjorie that night. My darling. Your house lives again. Not as you and I imagined, perhaps. There are no grandchildren running through the halls. No photos of David on the fridge. But there is warmth here. Laughter. The sound of keys turning in the lock with relief instead of fear. They're not our children. But they are our legacy. You would have loved Maya's spirit. Samira's boldness. Leo's quiet strength. They remind me of the best parts of us: resilient, kind, not afraid to try again. David came by. Once. He brought back what he could. Left with what I wouldn't give. Maybe that's enough. I no longer feel like I'm waiting to be remembered. I feel useful. I feel present. And that is the greatest gift you could have left me. Thank you for building this life with me. I'm still tending it. Always yours. Henry. I folded the letter and placed it in her recipe box, right between her rhubarb pie and chicken pot pie cards. She would have liked that. That night, I slept soundly, no dreams, no shadows. Just peace. The next morning, the house buzzed as it always did now, coffee brewing, showers running, someone laughing in the hallway about mismatched socks. The porch light clicked off with the sunrise, and I stepped outside with my cane and my tea. The world was still turning. But this time, I wasn't chasing it. I was in it. I looked out at the garden, Marjorie's snapdragons dancing in the breeze, and smiled. The house she and I built with love had found its purpose again. And so had I.